Welcome to Cults and Secret Societies. I'm your host, Ben Carter. In the heart of the dense Guyanese jungle, under a sultry tropical heat, lay a seemingly peaceful settlement. It was called Jonestown, named after its enigmatic leader, the Reverend Jim Jones. Here, in this distant corner of South America, over 900 followers of the People's Temple had found their promised land. Yet, behind the idyllic facade of communal living, there was a darker reality, a reality of fear, control, and a forbidden doctrine that would lead to one of the most chilling events in modern history. On the face of it, Jonestown was a utopian society, a racial and social paradise, where everyone was equal, where everyone was part of a family. But the society was built on a strict and oppressive regime. Jim Jones, a charismatic preacher from Indiana, had complete control over his followers, using a potent blend of religious fervor, social justice rhetoric, and psychological manipulation. He preached about the impending nuclear apocalypse, claiming that Jonestown was the only place on Earth that would be spared. But Jones was not just a preacher. He saw himself as a god, or at least a prophet chosen by a higher power. He demanded complete loyalty and obedience from his followers, who were made to pledge their lives to him, even if it meant death. This was a secret covenant, a pact known only to the inner circle of the People's Temple. For the rest, it was a doctrine they would only discover in the final hours of their lives. Outsiders were not welcome in Jonestown, and those who attempted to leave were dealt with harshly. Threats, intimidation, and even physical violence were used to keep the congregation in line. Jones controlled every aspect of their lives, from what they ate to who they could speak to and when they could sleep. Every public and private moment was governed by his rules. Despite the oppressive control, many followers remained blindly loyal to Jones, believing in his promise of salvation. But as the days turned into months and the months into years, cracks began to appear. Stories of abuse, fear, and desperation started to leak out of the jungle utopia. Still, the world remained largely oblivious to the horror that was about to unfold. On November 18, 1978, the day of reckoning arrived for the People's Temple. What started as a day like any other soon descended into a nightmare, as Jones gave the order for a mass suicide, a final act of defiance against a world he believed was out to destroy them. Over 900 men, women, and children perished that day, drinking a deadly potion of cyanide and fruit punch. The world was left in shock, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the tragedy. Today, the story of Jonestown serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and charismatic manipulation. It's a terrifying tale of a dream turned into a nightmare, of a society that began with the promise of equality and ended in mass death. The ghost of Jonestown continues to haunt us, a grim testament to the darkness that can lurk behind the most seemingly benign of faces. To understand how such a horrifying event could occur, we must delve into the origins of the People's Temple and its charismatic leader, Jim Jones. The People's Temple was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, during the mid-1950s. It was a time of social turbulence in America, with the civil rights movement gaining momentum and the Cold War fostering a climate of fear and suspicion. Amidst this backdrop, Jones, a self-proclaimed prophet, founded the People's Temple as a racially integrated church, a rarity in the racially segregated Midwest. His message of social equality and racial harmony was a beacon for many, drawing a diverse congregation that included African Americans, white liberals, and those disenchanted with the status quo. Jones was a master manipulator, blending elements of Christianity, socialism, and communist ideals to create a compelling, albeit skewed, vision of a utopian society. He preached about a world free of racism, poverty, and social inequality, a world where everyone would share in the bounty of the land. For those disillusioned with the state of America at the time, Jones's vision was a powerful lure. In the late 1960s, Jones moved his congregation to California, citing a prophecy of a nuclear apocalypse that would obliterate the Midwest. The temple expanded rapidly in California, garnering attention from the media and politicians. However, the growth also brought increased scrutiny, with allegations of abuse, financial mismanagement, and coercive tactics starting to surface. Jones, always paranoid, became increasingly fearful of the government's intervention. In response, he began a search for a sanctuary, a place where his congregation could live out their days in peace, away from the prying eyes of the world. This search led him to the South American country of Guyana, where he negotiated a lease for a large tract of jungle land. In 1974, the first settlers arrived to begin the construction of Jonestown, named after Jones himself. Jones portrayed Jonestown as a socialist paradise, a land of milk and honey, where everyone would live in harmony. But the reality was far from this idyllic vision. In truth, Jonestown was a tightly controlled society, a place where Jones's word was law and dissent was not tolerated. As we take this journey back in time, we must remember the context in which these events unfolded. The People's Temple and Jonestown were products of a turbulent era, born out of fear, disillusionment, and the desperate hope for a better world. The tragedy that unfolded was not just the result of one man's delusions, but also of the social and political conditions that allowed such a man to rise to power. At the heart of the People's Temple was its charismatic leader, Reverend Jim Jones. Born James Warren Jones in rural Indiana in 1931, he was greatly influenced by his mother, Lynetta Putnam, who believed her son was destined for greatness. This belief, instilled in Jones from an early age, would later fuel his ambition and drive his pursuit of power. Jones was a charismatic speaker, able to captivate audiences with his powerful sermons. He was well versed in the Bible, but his teachings were not traditional Christianity. He mixed Christian teachings with socialist ideals, creating a unique doctrine that appealed to those disillusioned with mainstream religion and society. Jones preached about equality, social justice, and the promise of a communal lifestyle where everyone shared in the bounty of the land. He presented himself as a prophet, claiming to have visions of a nuclear apocalypse and promising his followers that they could survive it by following him. He was, in essence, offering salvation, a powerful lure for many who felt marginalized and disenfranchised. In the People's Temple, Jones was not just the leader, he was the ultimate authority. His word was law, and his followers were expected to obey him without question. Dissent was not tolerated, and those who dared to question Jones's authority were often subjected to public humiliation or physical punishment. But Jones did not just rely on fear to maintain control. He was adept at manipulation, using a combination of charm, charisma, and coercion to keep his followers in line. He presented himself as a father figure, a savior, and a friend, roles that created a powerful emotional bond between him and his followers. This bond, coupled with the isolation and control exerted in Jonestown, made it difficult for many to break away, even when conditions became unbearable. The belief system of the People's Temple was not widely known outside the group. Jones knew that his doctrine, with its apocalyptic prophecies and socialist ideals, would not be widely accepted in mainstream society. As such, he kept much of it secret, revealing it only to those who had proven their loyalty and commitment to the cause. The doctrine was shared primarily through Jones's sermons, which were a central part of life in Jonestown. These sermons were often long, rambling affairs, filled with Jones's prophecies, teachings, and tirades against perceived enemies. Through these sermons, Jones maintained control over his followers, instilling fear, loyalty, and a sense of us versus them that further isolated them from the outside world. In the end, the belief system of the People's Temple was not just a doctrine. It was a tool of control, used by Jones to manipulate, isolate, and ultimately lead his followers down a path that ended in tragedy. It was a powerful, destructive force that kept the members of the People's Temple bound to Jones and to Jonestown until the very end. The walls of secrecy that surrounded Jonestown and the People's Temple have given rise to numerous conspiracy theories, each more chilling than the last. These theories delve into the hidden aspects of the cult, exploring allegations of secret dealings, mind control, and even connections to higher powers. One of the most prominent theories suggests that the People's Temple was not just a religious cult, but a covert experiment in psychological manipulation, orchestrated by the U.S. government. This theory hinges on the assertion that Jim Jones was in league with the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, and that Jonestown was a clandestine lab for testing mind control techniques. Supporters of this theory point to Jones's use of drugs to sedate dissenters, the frequent and intense conditioning sessions, and the mass suicide itself as evidence of a sinister government experiment gone awry. Another theory proposes that the People's Temple was a front for a socialist political agenda. Jones's well-documented affinity for socialism and his attempts to create a utopian society in Jonestown lend some credibility to this theory. It suggests that the People's Temple was part of a larger plot to promote and establish socialist principles, not just within the confines of Jonestown, but across the wider world. The alleged connections between Jones and influential political figures, both within and outside the U.S., add further fuel to this theory. A third theory posits that the mass suicide at Jonestown was not a suicide at all, but a mass murder orchestrated by Jones and a select inner circle. According to this theory, the members of the People's Temple were poisoned against their will, with the event staged to appear as a mass suicide to the outside world. This theory is supported by the fact that many of the bodies found at Jonestown had puncture wounds, suggesting they were forcibly injected with the poison. These theories, while speculative and unproven, illuminate the enduring fascination with, and horror of, Jonestown and the People's Temple. They reflect the collective unease about the capacity of charismatic leaders like Jones to manipulate, deceive, and control their followers. They also speak to a broader societal fear about the reach of hidden powers, be they government agencies or political ideologies, and their ability to shape and influence the lives of ordinary individuals. In the end, whether these theories hold any truth or not, they serve as a stark reminder of the dark and dangerous paths that unchecked power and influence can lead to. Delving deeper into the world of the People's Temple, a realm of symbols, codes, and secret knowledge emerges. These tools were used by Jones and his inner circle to maintain secrecy, loyalty, and ultimately power within the group. One of the most prominent symbols was the logo of the People's Temple itself, a cross within a heart inside a circle. This emblem, often seen on the temple's literature and buildings, represented the union of love, faith, and unity. The cross stood for faith, the heart for love, and the circle for unity and inclusion. It served as a visual shorthand for the idealized community Jones sought to build. Hand signs also played a role in the People's Temple. Members were taught to use these gestures as a way to communicate silently during meetings. The most recognized of these signs is the Q sign, formed by making a circle with the thumb and index finger, with the other three fingers spread out. This sign stood for quiet or silence, indicating that members should stop talking and listen. Coded language was another essential aspect of the group's communication. Jones often used biblical references and socialist jargon in his sermons and speeches. These references were not always obvious to outsiders, but held significant meaning for the members, who were familiar with Jones's ideological leanings. Words like apostolic, socialist Eden, and revolutionary suicide were part of the group's unique lexicon, each carrying specific connotations and implications. Perhaps the most secretive aspect of the People's Temple was its ritualistic White Nights. These were drills or rehearsals for mass suicide, conducted under the guise of preparing the community for potential attacks from outsiders. During these events, Jones would declare a White Night, and members would be summoned to the central pavilion, where they would be given a liquid they were told was poison. After a period of panic and fear, Jones would reveal that the poison was fake, and that the event was a test of loyalty. These macabre rehearsals not only instilled fear and obedience in the members, but also normalized the idea of mass suicide, paving the way for the tragic events of November 18, 1978. Within the People's Temple, symbols, signs, coded language, and rituals were all instrumental in creating a closed, insular community, bound by shared secrets and the chilling prospect of a collective demise. These elements served to tighten Jones's grip over his followers, isolating them from the outside world and making them more susceptible to his manipulations and control. While the People's Temple was adept at maintaining an outward image of harmony, there were those who saw through the facade and attempted to expose the truth. One such individual was Congressman Leo Ryan. Troubled by reports from constituents about the group, Ryan took it upon himself to investigate the People's Temple. In November 1978, Ryan, along with a delegation of journalists and concerned relatives, flew into Guyana with the intention of visiting Jonestown. They were met with a carefully choreographed display of contentment. However, as the visit wore on, a few brave members slipped notes to the visitors, begging for help to escape. Upon learning of these desperate pleas, Ryan offered to take anyone who wished to leave back to the United States. This act, seen as a threat to the carefully constructed illusion of Jonestown, led to Ryan and 4 others being shot dead at the nearby Port Kaituma airstrip by members of the People's Temple. In the aftermath of this tragic event, the People's Temple spun a web of disinformation to deflect blame. They claimed that the congressman had incited violence, and that the members who had fired the shots were acting in self-defense. This narrative, however, was largely dismissed by the media and the public, who saw the murders as a clear act of aggression by the cult. Another attempt to expose the truth about the People's Temple came from former members. After escaping the clutches of the cult, these individuals spoke out about the abuses they had suffered. Their testimonies, however, were met with denial and threats of legal action from the People's Temple. Jones himself would often personally respond to these allegations, accusing the defectors of lying and trying to undermine the group. In one notable case, a former member named Deborah Layton published a damning affidavit detailing the abuses and deprivations she had witnessed in Jonestown. In response, Jones led a smear campaign against Layton, branding her a traitor and a liar. Despite these attempts to expose the truth, the People's Temple managed to maintain control over its narrative, using deflection, disinformation, and threats to silence its critics. Unfortunately, it was not until the horrific events of November 18, 1978, that the full extent of the group's deception came to light. In the wake of the Jonestown massacre, the world was forced to confront the grim reality of the People's Temple, a reality that had been hidden behind a veil of secrecy and manipulation. The People's Temple was not just a political and social movement, but also a spiritual one. It was deeply rooted in religious doctrine and was built on a foundation of esoteric beliefs that were central to its existence and the ideologies it propagated. These beliefs, while seemingly bewildering to outsiders, provided the followers with a sense of purpose and identity. Jim Jones, the self-proclaimed prophet of the People's Temple, preached a sophisticated blend of Christian socialism, racial equality, and apocalyptic prophecies. He claimed to be a reincarnation of several religious figures, including Jesus Christ, Buddha, and Vladimir Lenin. This extraordinary claim was seen by his followers as proof of his divine authority, and it served to cement his position as the undisputed leader of the People's Temple. Jones's teachings were characterized by a profound spiritualism and a belief in the interconnectedness of all life. He preached that humanity was one, united in its struggle against the forces of evil. The members of the People's Temple were told that they were chosen to fight this battle, and that their efforts would lead to a utopian society where all races, genders, and classes would live in harmony. Jones also held a pessimistic view of the world, which he shared with his followers. He believed that society was on the brink of a nuclear apocalypse, and that only the members of the People's Temple would survive. This apocalyptic narrative was used to instill a sense of urgency and fear in the followers, making them more willing to follow Jones's commands without question. Jones's beliefs about divine authority were equally as unconventional. He claimed that he had been chosen by God to lead his people to salvation. He also asserted that he had the power to heal the sick, predict the future, and even resurrect the dead. These supernatural claims, while hard to believe for many, were accepted without question by his followers. Their faith in Jones was so strong that they were willing to follow him to the very end, even when it meant their own demise. It's worth noting that these spiritual beliefs were not mere eccentricities. They played a vital role in maintaining the cohesion and obedience of the People's Temple. The members were not only connected by their shared beliefs, but also by their shared fear of the impending apocalypse and their faith in Jones's divine authority. This deep-seated belief system was a crucial component of the People's Temple, and it provides a disturbing insight into the depths of manipulation and control that were at play in Jonestown. The impact of the Jonestown tragedy continues to reverberate through modern culture and power structures, casting a long and dark shadow. Nowhere is this more evident than in the collective consciousness of our society, where the term "drinking the Kool-Aid" has become synonymous with blind obedience and unquestioning loyalty to a leader or cause, even when it leads to self-destruction. In the realm of politics, the People's Temple and the Jonestown Massacre have served as stark reminders of the dangers of charismatic leadership and the potential for manipulation and control within closed, insular communities. This lesson has been repeatedly invoked in discussions about authoritarian regimes and cults of personality, where leaders use fear, propaganda, and promises of salvation to maintain their power and control. In the media, the Jonestown tragedy has been the subject of countless documentaries, films, novels, and articles. These narratives often focus on the manipulation and control exerted by Jim Jones and the tragic consequences of his followers' blind faith in him. While these accounts can sensationalize the events of Jonestown, they also serve as cautionary tales about the dangers of uncritical faith and obedience. In religion and spirituality, the lessons of Jonestown have prompted many faith communities to reevaluate their practices and beliefs. There has been a growing emphasis on promoting critical thinking, questioning, and open dialogue as a safeguard against manipulation and exploitation. This shift has also led to a greater scrutiny of charismatic leaders and their claims of divine authority. In education, the Jonestown Massacre is often studied as a case study in social psychology, exploring themes of groupthink, conformity, obedience, and the power of charismatic leadership. It has served as a stark lesson about the dangers of uncritical acceptance of authority and the importance of fostering independent thought and healthy skepticism. In finance, the People's Temple has been used as an example of financial fraud and economic exploitation. Jim Jones was known to have collected large sums of money from his followers, under the guise of communal living and shared resources. This has led to increased scrutiny and regulation of religious and non-profit organizations to prevent financial exploitation and fraud. In sum, the legacy of the People's Temple and the Jonestown Massacre is a potent reminder of the dangers of blind faith, uncritical obedience, and charismatic leadership. Its lessons continue to shape our society and power structures, prompting us to question, scrutinize, and challenge authority, and to value independent thought and critical thinking. But what if there's more to the story than what we've discussed so far? What if there were elements that are not as easy to reconcile with our understanding of the world? There are indeed a number of more radical theories that have emerged about what truly happened at Jonestown. Some delve into the realm of the occult, others suggest mind control, and some even posit extraterrestrial involvement. While these theories may seem far-fetched to some, they offer alternative perspectives on what might have transpired. The first of these theories relates to occult practices. Some speculate that Jim Jones and the People's Temple were engaged in dark magic or satanic rituals. These theories often cite Jones's seemingly hypnotic power over his followers and his use of fear as means of control as evidence of some sort of occult influence. They suggest that Jones may have tapped into some dark power that enabled him to manipulate and control his followers in ways that defy normal understanding. Another theory involves mind control and suggests the use of sophisticated psychological techniques or even drugs to manipulate the members of the People's Temple. Some point to the fact that many of the followers willingly participated in the mass suicide as evidence of some sort of mind control. They argue that it's implausible that so many people would willingly take their own lives and suggest that they must have been coerced or manipulated in some way. Then, there are those who believe that the events at Jonestown were influenced by extraterrestrials. These theories often point to Jones's teachings about a prophesied nuclear apocalypse, suggesting that this was a message from extraterrestrials warning of impending doom. They speculate that the mass suicide was a form of ascension, a way for the followers to escape the coming apocalypse and join the extraterrestrials in a higher plane of existence. These theories, while certainly unconventional, offer different interpretations of the events at Jonestown. They challenge our understanding of what is possible and invite us to consider alternatives that may not fit within our conventional frameworks. Whether or not you find these theories plausible, they remind us that there's always more than one way to look at a given event, and that sometimes the truth can be stranger than fiction. As we draw our exploration of Jonestown to a close, there are still many unanswered questions, lingering doubts, and unexplained pieces of evidence that continue to fuel speculations. What happened in the final hours of the People's Temple? What secrets went to the grave along with the 918 inhabitants of Jonestown? One of the most significant unanswered questions revolves around the cyanide-laced punch that precipitated the mass suicide. How was such a large quantity of lethal substance procured without raising suspicion? And more importantly, how did it end up in the remote jungles of Guyana, thousands of miles away from any major city? These logistics alone raise questions about potential outside involvement and complicity that remain unresolved to this day. Then there's the question of the audio recording of the final hours in Jonestown. This haunting tape, known as the death tape, features Jones urging his followers to commit revolutionary suicide. However, there are unexplained gaps in the recording. What happened during these missing minutes? Did it contain information too disturbing to release, or evidence that didn't align with the official narrative? Furthermore, why were there so few attempts to escape? In a community of nearly 1,000 people, it seems inconceivable that there wasn't more resistance or more attempts to flee. Were the people truly that brainwashed? Or is there another explanation that we are yet to uncover? Intriguingly, some survivors reported seeing armed guards, not part of the people's temple, in the surrounding jungles during the final hours. Who were these armed men, and what role did they play in the tragedy? Were they there to ensure the mass suicide went as planned? Or were they there for a different, perhaps even more sinister reason? And lastly, the question that perhaps haunts us the most: why? Why did so many people follow Jones to their doom? Was it truly out of loyalty and belief? Or was there a darker, more complicated psychology at play? The truth is, we may never fully understand what happened in those final hours at Jonestown. The dead have taken their secrets with them, and all we are left with are fragments of a bigger picture that we may never fully see. But perhaps it's the unanswered questions, the lingering doubts, and the unexplained evidence that make Jonestown such an enduring mystery. In the end, the story of Jonestown is a cautionary tale that reminds us of the dangers of blind faith and the power of manipulation. It's a story that forces us to question our understanding of reality and leaves us wondering about the untold secrets that lie in the heart of darkness. Thanks for listening. This has been Cults and Secret Societies. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.